Our first scripture lesson comes from 1 Samuel chapter 1, verses 4 to 20. Listen now to God speaking to you. On the day that Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to his wife Peninnah and to her sons and daughters. But to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. Her rival used to provoke her severely, to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on year by year. As often as she went up to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore Hannah wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah said to her, "Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? Why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons?" After they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose and presented herself before the Lord. Now Eli, the priest, was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. She made this vow, "O Lord of hosts, if only you will look on the misery of your servant and remember me, and not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a male child. Then I will set him before you as a Nazirite until the day of his death. He shall drink neither wine nor intoxicants, and no razor shall touch his head." As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying silently, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, "How long will you make a drunken spectacle of yourself? Put away your wine." But Hannah answered, "No, my lord, I am a woman deeply troubled. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation all this time." Then Eli answered, "Go in peace. The God of Israel grant the petition you have made to him." And she said, "Let your servant find favor in your sight." Then the woman went to her quarters, ate and drank with her husbands, and her countenance was sad no longer. They rose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord. Then they went back to their house at Ramah. Elkanah knew his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. In due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, "I have asked him of the Lord." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
The word of the Lord comes to us again, this time from John's Gospel, chapter 19, beginning at verse 25. We are at the crucifixion of Jesus. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. And from Paul's second letter to Timothy, chapter 1. I am grateful to God, whom I worship with a clear conscience, as my ancestors did, when I remember you constantly in my prayers night and day. Recalling your tears, I long to see you so that I may be filled with joy. I'm reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that lived first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now, I am sure, lives in you. For this reason, I remind you to rekindle the gift of God that is within you through a laying on of my hands. For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline. This is the word of the Lord. You know, there are so many great women in the Bible. It's important to notice that biblical women are generally not content, complacent, charming, tranquil, polite, mild, cheerful, satisfied, obliging, or amicable, as is generally assumed. Better adjectives for biblical women are daring, confident, passionate, searching, spirited, defiant, focused, rebellious, stubborn, and vibrant. With bold faith, spiritual wisdom, and valiant courage, they lead God's people and change the course of history. It's good to know and remember their stories. They're great examples for all of us, men and women alike. Since today is Mother's Day, I chose 3 great examples of mothers in the Bible. Artistic interpretations of what they might have looked like grace your bulletin cover today. See them as real people, as they were, dealing with hardships in the ancient world that we do not experience today. The first is Hannah. We find her worshiping around 1100 BC in Shiloh, 19 miles north of Jerusalem. She's in a polygamous marriage and does not have a child, which in her day was considered a curse from God. Her husband's first wife, Peninnah, has children and rubs her rival wife's nose in it. Month after month, year after year, she waits with decreasing hope. Hannah pours out her sorrowful heart before the Lord. I know that prayer, that desperate prayer, bargaining for a child. Lord, please, I beg you. I've served you all my life. I want a child. I'm sure hot tears ran down her face. God, if you answer, I promise I will dedicate my son to you. The Lord grants her request, and Hannah keeps her vow. She returns that little boy Samuel to the priest Eli after he was weaned, but she did not cease to pray for her boy. He grew to be a faithful priest, prophet, and judge. He anointed and guided the first kings of Israel. Under his guidance, Israel grew from a scattered people to a true nation. Perhaps all mothers believe their children will change the world. This one did. Hannah shows us the power of prayer. Who here saw or knew that their mother prayed for them? It's important to pray for our children, whether they are young or grown. And here are some good things to pray for them. That they will know and serve the Lord. That they will grow into who God is calling them to be. That they will develop and use the gifts God has given them to shine his light and make the world a better place. That they will love God and neighbor. That they will know great love, deep joy, and abiding peace in their lives. These are the really important things. So whether your children are doing well or struggling, God is faithful. Let us be faithful to our children by continually petitioning God on their behalf. God will not allow such passionate prayers to be in vain. No matter what the result, God determines in God's wisdom. Let your children know you pray for them. Let them see you and hear you praying for them. The most famous mother in the Bible is Jesus' mom, Mary. Mary's a young woman of humble means living with her family in a small town in Israel in approximately 4 BC. After a visit from the angel Gabriel telling her she will miraculously bear a son, God's son, Mary's final response is, I am the Lord's servant. Let everything you've said happen to me. Mary was not naive. She knew this child would be a handful. And she was right. The start of her marriage is embroiled in a scandal because of her pregnancy. What was supposed to be a happy family occasion, the dedication of 8-year-old Jesus in the temple, became the occasion for an ominous prophecy from Simeon to Mary. He said, "This child is destined for the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be opposed, so that the inner thoughts of many will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too." On Jesus' return to the temple as a young boy, he gets lost and then found by Joseph and Mary, and seems to rub it in that Joseph is not his real dad. At the wedding in Cana, Jesus gets a little testy with his mom when she calls on him to help with more wine for already drunk wedding guests. Once when he was teaching, someone interrupted him and said, "Your mother and your brothers are outside asking for you." He replied, "Who are my mothers and brothers?" And looking at the strangers he was teaching, said, "Here are my mothers and brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." Mom could not have been happy with that response. We also are sure that Mary must have played silly games with Jesus as a toddler. I'm sure Jesus loved his mother's cooking like no one else's. I know he wanted her when he didn't feel good, as everyone does. We're told that after the incident where he is lost and then found in the temple, he goes home with Mary and Joseph and is obedient to them. Mary helps Jesus grow, as Luke's gospel describes, in wisdom, in stature, and in favor with God and humans. Scholars believe that by the time Jesus' ministry begins, Joseph is dead. Jesus knows the commandment to honor your father and mother. He knows as the eldest son, upon his father's death, his mother becomes his responsibility. And so, with some of his final words, as we read this morning, Jesus makes arrangements for the care of the woman who believed the angel message, who praised God and pondered all these things in her heart, who raised him and loved him and stayed with him to this painful end for both of them. Mary stayed by Jesus through everything, even as the death penalty is carried out. This speaks volumes about Mary's faith in God. While her life as a mother of Jesus was far from easy, it was a life of faithfulness to God and trust that he would care for her and her son every step of the way. Mary shows us we can trust God with our children in all of life's unknowns. Mary also teaches us the importance of closeness to our children. We must stay close to have a good relationship with our children. I've heard parents say, if you ever get a piercing or a tattoo, don't bother coming home. If you fail at college or football or dance or sobriety, I will be forever disappointed in you. If you marry someone I don't like, I want no part of your life. If you get pregnant, you're on your own. If you're gay, I'm no longer your father. You should be a doctor. If you become a musician, I'm done with you. I've heard every one of those statements from past church members, Christians, and friends. Maybe you've heard or said something similar. This is wrong. God shows us what good parenting is. Love your children. No matter what they say in ignorance, do in immaturity, or choose, that may be a path you would not have chosen or did not imagine for them. Stay close to your children. You are their lifeline when something goes wrong. Jesus needed Mary, and she did not shrink away from him when soldiers came to kill all the babies in Bethlehem, when he touched lepers or ate with sinners, when he became unpopular, when he shattered her expectations, when he was in trouble with the law, when he died an agonizing death. She was there loving her son. Our children need us, whether they know it or not. In Lystra, in present-day Turkey, there lived a woman named Eunice. She was a Jewish woman who was married to a Greek man. At some point, she became a Christian and joined the church in Lystra. Eunice had a son named Timothy, and she and her mother, Lois, were influential in Timothy's faith formation. Paul met Timothy on his second missionary journey when he visited the church there. Timothy was likely a teenager at the time. Timothy left home to join Paul in his missionary work, becoming a leader in the early church. Who here considers their mom or grandma one of the shapers of their faith? Yeah. In Paul's second letter to a struggling Timothy, Paul tells him to remember the faith of his grandmother and mother, who showed Timothy that by the Spirit of Christ, we can be people of power and of love and of self-discipline. You know, faith is not primarily taught, it is caught in the words and deeds and spirit in mom and grandma. My grandmothers were both hardy women who endured physical and emotional hardships and yet lived lives of thanksgiving to God. I caught faith from them. But there's another member of my family who I never knew personally who has given me inspiration. Her name was Annie Alford, and she was my great-great-aunt. She was born in 1879 in Macomb, Mississippi, into a family of Methodist preachers, and she became a Methodist deaconess in 1919, the first female deaconess in the Methodist Episcopal Church South. Aunt Annie worked in orphanages and children's homes, and after she retired, she worked for the Wesley Foundation on college campuses. She was an unusual lady for her time. She was open-minded. To her, all people were God's children, and that was radical in 1919 Mississippi. When some of her relatives heard that I was in seminary, they told me about Aunt Annie, and they said she would be pleased with what I aspired to do. And now sometimes when I get discouraged, I think about Aunt Annie, and maybe she's proud of me, and I have it so much easier than she did. And in some mysterious way, I'm encouraged. This woman who never married, who had no children of her own, mothered and influenced so many young people. As Christian women, we have the unique calling and opportunity to pass on faith to our children and other young people we adopt into our hearts. 1 hour on Sunday is not enough. What happens at home The prayers, the Bible stories, the discussions, the way we treat each other matters and testifies to what we believe. What happens in our lives, our priorities of worship and study and service, our generosity, our ethics speak volumes into the lives of our children, grandchildren, and generations to come for Christ. Do we use the influence we have? Do we open up about faith to our children and grandchildren, even if they say they're not interested, even if their eyes roll, even if it's not popular to believe in God right now? Have we used our lives like Eunice and Lois? It's never too late to start. William Ross Wallace wrote a poem in 1865 praising the women in his life and recognizing their power. He wrote, "Blessings on the hand of women, angels guard its strength and grace in the palace, cottage, hovel. Oh, no matter where the place. Would that never storms assailed it, rainbows ever gently curled, for the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. Woman, how divine your mission here upon our natal sod. Keep the young heart open always to the breath of God. All true trophies of the ages are from mother love impearled, for the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world." May we always be mindful of the influence we have, the love and faithfulness required, and the prayers essential to this job called mothering. May we always be thankful for those who mothered us. Amen.